Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio. You're listening to The Jay Shapiro Show.
Hello again, this is Jay Shapiro. Thanks for listening. On today's program, I speak about several things, including how our new prime minister is seen in the Arab world, at least according to news reports from Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and a number of our neighbors. Prime Minister Naftali Bennett is almost totally unknown outside of Israel, and he's not really that too well known in Israel either, so it's interesting to see what the first impressions are. And I also speak about the contributions Israel and the Jews have made to the world. It's important every once in a while we remind ourselves of these things, especially at a time when anti-Semitism is growing rapidly in places around the world, particularly in the United States. In this introduction now, I want to say a few quick words about the fact that our Chief of Staff is visiting the United States now. One of the things he did in his various meetings with leaders of Congress, the Biden administration, and the U.S. military was to stress the danger of the United States returning to the so-called 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action with Iran. President Trump have withdrawn from it, and Biden is apparently planning to return to it. It's very unusual for a visiting military official from Israel, from any country, to make public comments on political issues. But this time, General Aviv Kochavi was apparently instructed to make an exception because of the importance of this issue. He explained the threat created by returning to the original nuclear deal with Iran and emphasized that all measures should be taken to prevent Iran from gaining nuclear capabilities. He hinted very broadly that Israel will take whatever action is needed to prevent this from happening because this is an existential threat to Israel, very serious. And that the very fact that he was given permission to be outspoken on this issue is important. I'll be back after the break. Thanks again for listening.
How did a nice Jewish girl from Delaware end up living in Israel? Shalom, I'm Natalie Sapinski. Join me on my show, Returning Home. Meet different people who have moved to Israel. Hear their personal stories, their highs, their lows, and everything in between. Each week, we talk to experts on immigration and the process of moving to Israel. Listen to Returning Home every Thursday, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
You're listening to The Jay Shapiro Show.
You're back with Jay Shapiro. I came across a couple of articles upon a subject that I found rather fascinating, a little bit unusual, and I want to share what I learned with the listeners for what it's worth. The subject is, what does the Arab world consider about our new Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett? So what's happened is the following. There's been more than a decade under the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, and all of a sudden we have a new Prime Minister. Now, Netanyahu's years in power have been extremely significant for Israel's relations with the Arab world. For example, and most notably, with the aid of former U.S. President Donald Trump, Netanyahu signed normalization agreements with 4 Arab and African countries. And this was after at least 25 years of total stagnation, nothing happening between Israel and the Muslim countries, not just Arab, but also Muslim. Now, Bennett is the head of a right-wing party, and he's been part of Israel's political system for about 15 years. However, nobody knows what his regional and international presence is. What does he think about relations with other countries? So, what are these other countries or the media in these other countries and the experts, what are they saying about this new prime minister? Now, there's a media giant called Al Jazeera, and that's based in Qatar. And they published an article about Bennett shortly after he was sworn in, calling him Netanyahu's student. And this article took note of the fact that Bennett is the first prime minister to come from what Al Jazeera called the hardline religious right, and said that he is one of the strongest opponents to the founding of a Palestinian state. And this article went on to mention Bennett being very successful in the high-tech sector. He was a CEO of 2 software technology companies, and each sold for tens of millions of dollars. Now, that was what the Al Jazeera said. Now, there's a news website financed by Saudi Arabia called Al Arabiya, and they don't mention Bennett's position on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict at all. In an article that can almost be called flattering, Al Arabiya talks about his success in business, his background in the elite Israeli military forces, and his various political exploits in recent years. Now, both of these media giants from 2 different Muslim countries mention his relative liberalism concerning religious matters. It's interesting that they point this out. They say he has little interest in matters of church and state, and both these Muslim media outlets take note of the fact that Bennett shakes hands with women. Al Jazeera adds that he has liberal ideas, especially regarding the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community. The Al Arabiya points to the fact that Bennett's wife doesn't cover her hair. That's very fascinating. These major Muslim Arab media point out these kinds of things. So I think a lot of the Jewish newspapers around the world don't mention it. Anyhow, there is an organization called the Al-Quds Center for Political Studies, and they're located in Jordan. And they said that first of all, they think there's a deep feeling of relief among most of the Arab countries, especially in Palestine and Jordan, that Netanyahu is getting out of the picture. So how do they look upon Bennett, and how is he viewed in the Arab world according to this outlet in Jordan? They say what matters is specifically what is his approach to the Palestinian-Israel conflict. He's in the far-right camp. He's seen as opposing a 2-state solution and a Palestinian state, as well as supporting Jewish settlements in the West Bank. This and statements perceived as hawkish in the past have built his image as a hard-line leader in the Arab eyes, or at least the Arab eyes in Jordan. So that could be a cause for pessimism. At the same time, Bennett is seen as a weak leader, lacking the international status and personal charisma of Netanyahu. And you got to remember, by the way, that Netanyahu was really unusual. He was an international personality, no 2 ways about it. So now the Jordanian paper says that knowing this government, the prime minister has no charismatic personality, that is Bennett, no connection with the international scene, and it will be easier to counter the Israeli narrative. In other words, they see Bennett as being weaker than Netanyahu, and especially in the U.S. decision-making institutions. So the paper in Jordan says that we don't think that Bennett can fill the vacuum of Netanyahu or succeed in establishing strong influence in many international capitals, not only in Washington, European countries, but also in Russia. In other words, they see Bennett as being weak. But I think I would disagree and say that it's not so much seeing as weak, I think he's seeing more as unknown. And they should bear in mind that Arab countries are not reacting the same way to this issue. In many countries, for example, there is little or no interest in the identity of the Israeli prime ministers. Now, a lot of people, according to the Jordanian outlet, they're not happy to see Netanyahu depart the scene because he was a known quantity. Netanyahu, together with Donald Trump, was a strong ally, regionally and most certainly against a mutual enemy, Iran. Others, such as the Jordanians and the Palestinians, are what has been termed the resistance axis. The Jordan could be seen as being friendly with Iran and Syria and Hezbollah and Hamas. So it depends where you are in the Arab world how you see this new prime minister of Israel. Now, another guy who's a scholar in a guy named Dr. Marwa Maziad, he's with the Middle East Institute's Defense and Security Program, which is based in Washington. And he said that people in the Arab world expect Israel's policies to remain the same under Bennett. Many Arab voices in the media are saying that Bennett and his partners will be continuation of the same policies as Netanyahu, and rightly so, because Netanyahu's legacies will outlast his presence as prime minister. Now, it could be, according to some of these Muslim experts, that Bennett will look to further relations with the Arab world that Netanyahu started. And they also say that he can be expected to have some degree in connecting with other Arab nations, because Bennett stated that he welcomed the Abraham Accords. And so so far, by the way, the thing that makes it interesting is the new American President Biden says that he agrees with the Abraham Accords, even though it was done by the Trump administration. So there might be even a Bennett-Biden interest in further fostering relations with more Arab countries in order to cement this achievement in Arab-Israeli relations and give it, other countries be involved, which the United States might be see as good for the United States. So other experts say that there's no clear picture of how Bennett is perceived. By the way, it all depends on what part of the Arab world that you look at Israel. There's a Qatar, Hamas, Iran bloc, and they're attacking Bennett. For them, it doesn't matter who leads the Israeli government, it's all the same. However, the Gulf states, on the other hand, have gotten accustomed to Netanyahu. They know Netanyahu, and they know what he thinks about the Iranians, which pretty much is what they think about the Iranians. So they like Netanyahu. So people in the Gulf states are waiting to see Bennett's policy and his conduct regarding these regional issues. The bottom line with them is, how is he going to react to Iran? That's what's most important to them. So I just wanted to share with the listeners what I gathered from this review of the Arab media, the Muslim media, what do they think about our new prime minister? So it's a mixed collection, if you will. There are those who see him as being good against Iran, and there's those who are just waiting to see how things are going to turn out. I'll be back after the break.
Shalom, everybody. Making a difference often takes just one moment and one person at a time. I am Orly Benny Davis, your show host on Israel News Talk Radios from Jerusalem with Love. You'll be hearing people talking about politics, religion, social issues, and making a better tomorrow. Join me, Orly Benny Davis, for God and Country. From Jerusalem with Love.
Wednesdays on Israel News Talk Radio.
You're listening to The Jay Shapiro Show.
We're back with Jay Shapiro. I've mentioned often in the past that Israel is a country that has no natural resources. We don't have coal, we don't have iron, we don't have anything that other countries have. But we do have one fantastic natural resource that's very viable, and that is the people. The people of Israel are its national resource, and when the country enables the people to do their thing, to develop themselves, then we can become an international power, and that is what has happened. And Walter Binga has called attention to it, and he listed some of the things. I want to share them with the readers also because they have to be repeated so people should really know. Because Israel is the 100th smallest country. It has less than 1/1000th of the world's population, and yet it has made fantastic advances in almost every field. For example, laptops, PCs, mobile phones, because Intel's new multi-core processor was completely developed at facilities in Israel, and the ubiquitous mobile phones were developed in Israel by Motorola, which has its largest development center in Israel. The Internet Protocol technology was pioneered in Israel. The Microsoft has used Israel. Bill Gates, the head of Microsoft, in a rare statement, said that Israel's developments in tech areas like analytics and security were improving the world. And he also called Israel a major player in the high-tech world. Several Windows operating systems were developed by Microsoft Israel. A chip technology was designed in Israel at Intel, and both Microsoft and Cisco built their only R&D facilities outside the United States and Israel. And believe it or not, more than 3,000 high-tech companies are in Israel. Israel has the highest concentration of high-tech companies in the world outside of Silicon Valley. In other words, we are able to use our people and develop our people as a natural resource. In 2019, more than 8.2% of Israel's workers were employed in technical professions. In 2016, the latest year for the what's called the Occupational Employment Statistics Survey data, 4.9% of workers were employed in science and technology. So Israel occupies first place in this category as well. Now, take for example, in New York, there's something called AirTrain. It's a light rail, a railroad. It's more than 8 miles long. It connects JFK Airport to New York City's mass transit. It's protected by Israeli-developed Nextiva surveillance system. Israel's expertise in anti-terrorist security is sought after in many parts of the world. Keep in mind that Israel is really way ahead of everybody else in anti-terrorist security, unfortunately, because of the situation we live. Israeli researchers have designed the first flight system to protect passenger and freighter aircraft against missile attack. They developed the Express Shunt to provide relief for glaucoma sufferers. They've unveiled a blood test to diagnose heart attacks by telephone. They found a combination of electrical stimulation and chemotherapy that makes cancerous metastases disappear, and developed the first fully computerized no radiation diagnosis instrumentation for breast cancer. They developed the first ingestible video camera so small that fits inside a pill, and is used to view the small intestine from inside. So it enables doctors to diagnose cancer and digestive disorders. Israel has also perfected a new device that directly helps the heart to pump blood, which is an innovation with the potential to save lives among those with congestive heart failure, and it can synchronize the heart's mechanical operations through a sophisticated system of sensors. They've discovered the molecular trigger that causes psoriasis and a lot of other things. Now, there are people who are calling for the boycott of Israel, all these anti-Israel campaigns. But boycotting Israel, anti-Israel, is really anti-Semitic. Furthermore, now there are people who are anti-Jewish, and they're anti-Semitic, and they're also anti-Israel. But it's been pointed out, if you really think the Jews should be boycotted, you have to take a look at all the medical devices and everything that was developed by Jews, not just Israelis. There's a Wasserman test for syphilis. There's a development of diagnostic tests for diphtheria by Bela Schick. The vaccine for hepatitis was discovered by Baruch Bloomberg. In other words, the Jews have contributed, and of course, in my day, of course, the thing that really stood out was that Jonas Salk, a Jew, developed the first polio vaccine, and later Albert Sabin perfected an oral version. I remember that in my time, because when I was a kid, the fear of polio was really something. And these problems were solved by Jews. So these are some of the things that humanitarianism requires Jews to offer what they learn and what they develop to all the peoples of the world. So anti-Semites who want to boycott these things and go ahead and turn them down. But when it comes to their own health and survival, they worry about themselves, and they end up using things that were developed by Jews or in Israel. By the way, my friend Walter Bingham also pointed out something of interest. The American trade unions, including the American postal workers and the Teamsters, have attacked their British counterparts for planning to boycott Israel. They wrote a statement this again, this is two U.S. trade unions. They said, imagine a world today that never knew Israel. It was signed by more than 20 representatives from trade unions, and it said in part, rather than divestment from Israel, we believe that investment of time, energy, and material aid is the best means to alleviate the ongoing suffering of Palestinians. That's interesting. They also attacked the plans for any academic boycott, and they said that rather than limiting interactions with Israeli educators and academics and educational institutions, we see the importance of maximizing rather than proscribing the free flow of ideas and academic interaction between peoples, cultures, religions, and countries. Now, imagine a world today that never knew Israel. And then go further and imagine what our world would be like if Israel's enemies won out. Would you rather live in Iran, Iraq, Syria, or Afghanistan, or in Israel, the only democratic state in the Middle East? It's emphasized by the American Union, like the AFL-CIO, the American Federation of Labor, and the Congress of Industrial Organizations, representing more than 12.5 million working people in the United States. They've made up of 55 national and international unions. The president, a gentleman named Richard Trumkin, said about Israel, so long as I'm president, you'll never have a stronger ally for Israel than the AFL-CIO. So the bottom line is that every now and then I think we have to remind ourselves not only what Israel has contributed, but what Jews have contributed to the welfare and the benefit of the world. And Israel, as the Jewish nation, is a collective that has produced, particularly now we're living in the high-tech era, they're producing major advances that help the entire world. So anyone who's interested in boycotting Israel is essentially is interested in making the world a less beneficial and a less pleasant and a less healthy place. I think once in a while we have to remind even ourselves of this fact. I'll be back after the break.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
This is Shai Ben-Tekoa, and each week I'll be webcasting to you from Judea, origin of the word Jew, a people besieged and beleaguered in every generation. Nazi Germany's but a memory, but in its place the world invented the phantom Palestinians as this generation's internationally authorized Jew killers. Tune in for a different slant on life in Israel, Phantom Nation, every Monday.
Hi, I'm Rabbi David Aaron. The soul basics are the most profound, the most essential, and yet often the most neglected in our education. Join me for Soul Talk on Israel's News Talk Radio and discover the secrets to love, spiritual growth, and personal power.
You're listening to The Jay Shapiro Show.
You're back with Jay Shapiro. For this last segment of the program, I want to do what I like to call under the radar. These are items that don't get the big headlines, and they're important because they provide information about what's happening in Israel and in the Jewish world. They're not related to each other, but I think they provide a picture and color. The first has to do with Israeli camouflage technology, and it makes soldiers essentially invisible. A company in Israel called Polaris Solution developed an innovative new material that provides multispectral concealment. That's a mouthful. What happens is the following. In cooperation with the Defense Ministry, this company called Polaris Solutions unveiled an item called Kit 300, which is an innovative camouflage sheet made out of a material that provides multispectral concealment. According to Polaris Solutions, nothing else like its camouflage sheet exists on the market anywhere today. The co-founder of the company said, as far as we know, or as far as we saw in other armies around the world, we are very unique. To establish that, we actually registered a patent on it in many countries around the world. Now, what is this thing? It's a lightweight sheet made out of a special thermal visual concealment material. These things are going to be popular now, and they're called by their initial, thermal visual concealment, TVC. It's comprised of metals and polymers and microfibers, and thanks to this TVC material, soldiers are much more difficult to see both with the naked eye and with thermal imaging equipment. Each sheet comes with different coloration on it on each side, one for dense vegetation and the other for more desert-like landscapes. In addition, the company customizes patterns and coloring based on the client needs and geographic region. This material, which is sturdy, can be molded into three-dimensional shapes or folded into a compact roll. It's also waterproof, can provide shelter, or be fashioned into a stretcher to carry wounded soldiers on the battlefield. It can carry weight up to 250 kilometers, can be used as a splint to immobilize a broken bone, and can serve as a hypothermia blanket. While invisibility was once the realm of science fiction or fantasy, this company called Polaris Solutions has revealed that it is in the process of developing products could soon turn the idea into reality. It'll take years to develop it completely. The article about this camouflage technology also showed a picture, and it's impossible to see this anybody under this sheet. So it really is. It's a whole new thing for Israel. It's a whole new thing for the world. And these guys are going to make a lot of money on this because armies can use it. As a matter of fact, you don't have to be an army to use it. It's nice to be invisible for a lot of reasons. Okay, that's item number one. Now, item number two, completely not related to item number one, is the fact that more than 80 Christian leaders sent a letter of congratulation and thanks to the new Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett. A letter was sent from this Christian group, and it was spearheaded by something called the Philos Project, which is an American nonprofit based in New York City that seeks to promote Christian engagement in the Near East. There are such organizations. And what they said in the letter to our Prime Minister was, we want to thank you in advance for protecting our shared values as they apply to Israel's citizens, whether Jews, Christians, Muslims, or Druze, for guarding the holy sites and welcoming religious pilgrims around the world to discover the birthplace of their faith, for defending Israel from outside aggression, and continue to work toward peace with Israel's neighbors. In return, we pledge to deepen our friendship with your country and its wonderful people. Now, the president of this organization, Philos Project, a fellow named Robert Nicholson, said that it's a historic moment in Israel. Things are changing politically, and we thought this event was momentous enough to lead this effort and show the Prime Minister, the coalition in the world, there is not only real Christian friendship for Israel and the Jewish people, but a very wide-ranging group of Christians who care about Israel and its people. Now, interestingly enough, by the way, that's one of the reasons I want to mention on the program, the letter was signed by Christian leaders of multiple denominations, including Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, from all around the world, from North America, from South America, Europe, Africa, and Asia. They represent hundreds of millions of Christians involved in churches and other Christian organizations. The signers of this letter include representatives from America's National Prayer Committee, National Religious Broadcasters, Christians United for Israel, King's College, International Christian Embassy in Jerusalem, the Congress of Christian Leaders, and more. The leaders wrote that what unites them is their love for and strong defense of sovereign Jewish state with Jerusalem as its capital. They also wrote to the Prime Minister they will pray to God that He grants you wisdom and strength as you make hard decisions that will affect the lives of millions, and they trust that God will answer those prayers. And this fellow Nicholson, who's the president of this organization, said sometimes there's confusion about why Christians care about Israel and the Jews. He said that the letter points out the source of this connection. It's shared values, and particularly the values that come out of the Hebrew Bible. There is a feeling of kinship between Christians and the people who wrote the book we all read, unquote. That's really nice. It's sort of heartwarming with all the problems that Jews have had with Christians for the last 2,000 years. This kind of thing is not to be sniffed at. It really is fantastic that there are people, millions of Christians in the United States, voters, who are supportive of Israel and supportive of those who support Israel. So I think that's an important thing for the listeners to know, really important. The next item, again, not related to the previous one, has to do with something, a relationship between Jordan and Israel that's suddenly come to an end. There's a project that's long been considered a symbol of cooperation between Jordan, Israel, and the Palestinian Authority. It was a desalination water program dubbed the Red Dead Project. And the Foreign Ministry and Ministry of Regional Cooperation have not received any formal notification of Jordan's decision, although the Jordanians themselves announced it. Now, this project, interestingly enough, started back in 2002, it's 19 years ago. It's long been frozen, and professionals have expressed concern about environmental issues and the cost effectiveness of the project compared to other alternatives. The initial project would have piped 2 billion cubic meters of water from Aqaba it's a gulf in the south of Israel. The water would have been pumped to a desalination plant near the Dead Sea. 18 million cubic cubic. What is the unit here? Cubic. What the unit is. Anyhow, it's a lot of water. Would have been produced. They would have produced this desalinated water, and it would have been sent back to Jordan, while the salty residue would have been piped into the Dead Sea to stabilize the Dead Sea itself, because the Dead Sea has a problem that it's shrinking. So the link between the Dead Sea and the Red Sea led to the project's nickname. It was called the Red Dead. I remember when this was spoken about, tremendous popularity at the time. Now, it was scaled down after the beginning, and according to the reports now, Jordan is now expected to move forward with a smaller desalination project within the kingdom itself without any partnership with Israel, the Palestinian Authority. Now, Jordan suffers some very, very severe water shortages that have helped fuel some of the instability and frustration over there. And a matter of fact, there was criticism was leveled against the prime minister because he really didn't push to stabilize relations with Jordan and improve them. So anyhow, we still provide Jordan with water, but this very, very ambitious project has come to an end for various reasons, probably mostly political. At any rate, these are a couple of items I wanted that are under the radar, and I wanted to pass them on to the listeners so you know what's happening here in Israel and with our neighbors. So until next time, then, Jay Shapiro signing off. Take care of yourselves.
Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. Just click the orange button at the top of the IsraelNewsTalkRadio.home page, log in as yourself or an anonymous guest, and join in on the fun. You'll meet other listeners from all over the world who listen to Israel News Talk Radio, and you can make new friends. Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. It's the closest you can get to being in the studio with us.
We love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.